Hi everyone, and welcome to StudioJake. I, of course, am your host, Jacob Airy. Thank you so much for joining me today. Before I dive into the topic, I want to remind everyone that I write novels. They're all three available on Amazon, as well as barnesandnoble.com. And these two, my fantasy parts 1 and 2 of my fantasy trilogy, they're also available on booklocker.com. And Cacophony, like I said, Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. I hope that you will pick out a copy to read for the new year. All right, so now we're going to dive into the topic. I talk about Transformers a lot on this channel. I've done several videos. I've mentioned them in multiple articles on my website. I've talked about them kind of in the peripheral. I talked about them a lot in my video reacting to the trailer of the Transformers Rise of the Beast. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit more, go a little bit more in depth with the comic book situation of Transformers, because it is... Transformers has always had a rich history in comic books. So one of the things, though, that has happened recently is IDW, they got the Transformers comics after Dreamwave Comics folded. So for those of you who don't know, Transformers, of course, in America is owned by Hasbro, and in Japan they're owned by Takara. Now Takara does its own stuff. They do manga mainly, obviously, some light novels here and there. With Hasbro, they license it out, and they've done novels. I've read a couple of novels. They're really good, not just based in the Bayverse. They also have several others. And originally, Marvel actually had the rights to Transformers comics. In fact, they did a couple of crossovers, believe it or not, with Spider-Man. I know that's hard to believe, but it's the truth. Well, then after the Marvel Comics run was complete, Transformers comics kind of died down for a while, and they tried to do Generation 2, but it didn't really spark any interest. They didn't bring the TV show back, which I think that had something to do with it, because Transformers always existed as a television show originally. So I think that not bringing back Generation 2 for a TV show or even just a movie, I think that was a mistake, especially with the way the series ended, because the series kind of ends on a cliffhanger. But anyway, after Marvel was done, they did a run with a comic book company called Dreamwave Comics. Now, Dreamwave was fantastic. Now, their strategy, they didn't do a whole lot of original comics. So like with Marvel and DC, they primarily do stuff that they own. Right now, I know at one time, Marvel used to license a lot of property. They did Conan the Barbarian, they did Transformers, they did Star Wars, which of course now they own. As DC, they did Wildstorm, but of course they own Wildstorm. Well, with Dreamwave, their strategy was to do as little original content as possible, and they just licensed out everything. So in their scenario, they had the license to do Mega Man, Street Fighter, which their Street Fighter run was actually pretty good. I have to give them credit for that. G.I. Joe. Did I mention G.I. Joe? Maybe not. I can't remember. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which their Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was amazing. I freaking loved their Ninja Turtles comic book line. And then, of course, Transformers. Well, when Dreamwave went under, which I'm not going to get into that there's plenty of other videos that go into it. If you would like for me to talk about the rise and fall of Dreamwave, please let me know in the comments below. But anyway, when they folded, the rights transferred to a company called IDW Comics. You get it? Dreamwave Comics, DW, and then came along IDW Comics. Kind of interesting. So IDW decided to progress the storyline that Dreamwave had already started. And in fact, they even reprinted a lot of Dreamwave's works. Now, one of the things that I'm a little disappointed in is that they abandoned the War Within storyline. So in Dreamwave Comics, they did kind of a prequel to the Transformers arriving to Earth called The War Within, and it was about Optimus Prime receiving the Matrix, and then he and Megatron disappear, and then there's like all these factions of different Autobots and Decepticons vying for power, but then they have to unite because someone more evil than Megatron arrives, who was called the Fallen, which of course, the Fallen made an appearance in Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, although he looks way cooler in the comic books than he does in the movie. That's just my opinion. Well, with this sort of a new version. IDW let those comics run their course. They did a bunch of really cool stuff. I have to give them credit. But then they did their infamous Regeneration 1. So what Regeneration 1 did was it totally rebooted the Transformers. So Marvel Comics had established its own continuity apart from the animated series, as had Dreamwave, which that was what War Within was about. So IDW was like, hey, we want to get a piece of that action too. So they did this reboot. And at first it was really good. They did some weird things, like they made before the Decepticons were called that, they were called the Ascenticons. I thought that was kind of dumb. They made Optimus Prime and Megatron kind of friends before the war, whereas in all forms, Megatron was starting his conspiracy. Optimus Prime was aware of him, which I think they borrowed that from Transformers Prime, the animated series, because Optimus Prime and Megatron were friends during that time when Optimus Prime was just called Orion Pax and Megatron was called Megatronus. But anyway, that's again it's another rabbit trail. Like I said, Transformers is one of my jams. So I kind of kept up with IDW. I was buying some comics every now and again just to kind of get a feel of what was going on. Well, IDW, if you haven't heard, they recently lost the license to Transformers and G.I. Joe, which is actually not really a surprise to me, because as the years went on, their content got crappier and crappier. They started hiring writers who would have success sort of in niche things, or they would hire people who kind of were like has-beens, like maybe they had worked for the big two, but they had their heyday because they were new and fresh over there, but then they started to lose their shine a little bit, as it were. And then, of course, they got involved with the fan fiction crowd, which from social media. And IDW decided to infect Transformers, which is a story about two factions of giant robots punching each other, while one side wants to protect the Earth, the other side wants to mine it for all of its energy. Absolutely crazy right turn that IDW did with that whole plot situation. They decided to, for one thing, with Regeneration 1, I don't think they actually ever made it to Earth. I think that because the series got canceled and they started to do other stuff, like they did Lost Light, which was about Hot Rod takes a crew into deep space because they're trying to find other Transformers that are lost because of the war. They end up on the wrong side of the galaxy, so they have to go back the other direction. The crew was a mix of Autobots and Decepticons, and it was a pretty big crew. They had a lot of Transformers on it. Well, in these titles, like I said, they started to put in all of these politically correct, politically pandering messaging to the Transformers, and they did the same thing with G.I. Joe, by the way. And as a result, now, political writing has always been a part of every medium, and sometimes it's been one political direction, sometimes it's been the other. But for instance, I always say Star Trek: The Next Generation, it's a liberal show, it's a politically correct show, but it's not woke. They don't let the politics of the situations get in the way of the story, the narrative, the character development. Well, with this new generation, they have to get all woke, right? Everything has to be hypersensitive to the times. So then a story about two giant robot factions fighting each other ends up becoming this political parable that no one cares about and no one wants to read. And I know this might sound harsh, but in my opinion, IDW Comics deserve to lose the license, even if their stuff was flying off the shelves. But here's the kicker. I actually got into two of the tales that were happening. I got into Transformers, I think it was called Escape, and then Transformers the Wreckers. I actually thought that those stories were good. They didn't have a lot of political messaging in them. They were well written. I thought the artwork was good in both of them. However, in their main Transformer stories, as well as in the Lost Light spinoff, and they had Optimus Prime go off somewhere for some reason, and with all this in mind, I honestly think that they deserve to lose the license. I mean, when I went to my comic book shop, I would always see if there was a Transformers comic available. And for the first couple of years, they had a lot of Transformers stuff. You could buy all the series. You could buy Lost Light. You could buy Transformers. You could buy Regeneration 1. You could buy it all the miniseries. Well, just before I moved out of LA with my super cute wife, they didn't have Transformers at all. In fact, the reason I got Wreckers was actually because of a mistake. But it's kind of got to this point where where no one wanted to read them, even if they were good, like Wreckers or Escape, because it's kind of like, okay, why are you telling me about the latest political fad? I don't need to hear that in a story about robots punching each other. Now, and another weird thing they did was, so this was long established lore, whether it be from the cartoon, from all the cartoons really, or from the Marvel comics and the Dreamwave comics. It had long been established that there were no organic life forms left on Cybertron. In fact, this was sort of a subplot of Beast Machines, which was a terrible Transformers show, by the way. But one of the subplots is Optimus Primal wanted to try to reawaken the ancient organic material that existed on Cybertron, using, of course, the power of his spark. He didn't have the Matrix. No one really knew who had the Matrix during the time of Beast Wars, although comic books established that it was Leo Primal or Leo Convoy, who was from Beast Wars 2. But anyway, I digress. With IDW Comics, they just kept shoving in a lot of political nonsense. They kept shoving in all of this modern sort of talking point about, things like gender assignment, things like that. It was really, really dumb and bleak, and it watered down what Transformers was about, which is that no matter how similar we are, we have difference. Now, I'm not trying to make Transformers anything deep. I'm certainly not. Though I do think some of the writers tried to give you deep lessons in all the cartoons and whatnot. But now we even saw how the infection of political pandering that was happening at IDW, it's happening at Nickelodeon as well, who is doing the current Transformers animated series. They're inserting these dumb political talking points that don't make any sense. So with them losing the license, which again I think it's really good, who do I think they should go to? Well, I think there's a couple of possibilities. Boom Studios would be ideal. They've been doing a great job with Power Rangers. Now, to be fair, I haven't read the Power Rangers. I was never a Power Rangers fan, so I can't really say if it's good from that perspective, but from what I've read from other reviewers, they say they've actually started reading the Power Rangers comics from Boom Studios, and also Boom Studios does Berserker, the miniseries from Keanu Reeves and Matt Kindt. Very entertaining, very strong, very very brutal storylines. And I have read that, and I do love that. So that's a possibility. I would love to see. Titans comics would be really good. I thought they handled the Robotech franchise really well. I thought they did a good job. I think that their art is great, and also Simon Furman, who is a Transformers legend. He wrote for Marvel Comics. He wrote for Dreamwave Comics. I think he briefly wrote for IDW. Maybe he did more than I think. I don't know, but he also he started writing for Titans comics for the Robotech material, and it was really good. So with all that in mind, I would like to see them. 4 or 5 years ago. Oh, maybe not. No, I shouldn't even say that. 7 years ago, I would have said, man, I hope DC or Marvel gets them. But now I don't. Marvel and DC have really gone downhill the last few years, just with all this ridiculous stuff that they were doing it even before the Transformers were doing the political pandering. They made political pandering in comic books cool, the two mainstream. So, it's kind of funny. There are some indie presses that I would love also to have a crack at Transformers. I'd love to see Antarctic Press get it. I'd love to see Iconic Comics get it, especially Iconic Comics. The two guys who run that are fantastic. Hey, who knows? Maybe the Rippaverse would get it. Could you imagine Eric July being the editor and or writer of Transformers? Man, that would be fantastic. I don't know. Eric July, maybe that would be something you would be interested in. Hit me up if you want to pick up that license. Whatever the case may be, I would love to see Transformers land somewhere where it goes back to being the sci-fi mech story about two factions warring. One wants to mine Earth and take advantage of humanity. The other wants to protect humanity and work with their human allies. I would love to see Transformers return to basics in that manner, but who knows in this day and age? Not sure if that's possible, but I hold out hope. Transformers are more than meets the eye. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you'll give it a thumbs up, that you'll leave me a comment, tell me what you think, that you'll share it out with your friends, and of course, consider subscribing to StudioJake. I cover all kinds of nerd and pop culture topics, including film, television, anime, comic books, and so much more. I hope that you'll also head over to my main website, StudioJakeMedia.com, where I have even more news, views, and commentary. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, head over to my locals page. That's studiojakemedia.locals.com. It's the best way to support me. I'm trying to build a little community there. I have exclusive reviews and articles, so definitely head over there and check it out. And I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.